Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. 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 Come, yet again come.
Welcome, everyone, and especially to our visitors to this online gathering of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Bowling Green. We are a welcoming congregation. Whoever you are, however you identify, wherever you come from, and whoever you love, you are welcome here. Our Sunday services are different each week so that we can honor and learn from a wide array of traditions and beliefs. Today, our speaker is Reverend Dr. Deane Oliva. Though we each walk our own path here in this place and now at this time, we journey together as a community. For Unitarian Universalists, the flaming chalice is a symbol of the light of learning and the love of our community. This morning, our chalice will be lit by Jeffrey Strong. As our congregation's chalice is lit, you're welcome to join us in singing hymn number 362, Rise Up, O Flame.
glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy.
This morning, I will be giving the opening reading by Kimberly Ann Tomzak Carlson. It's not by chance that you arrived here today. You have been looking for something larger than yourself. Inside of you, there is a yearning, a calling, a hope for more, a desire for a place of belonging and caring. Through your struggles, someone nurtured you into being, instilling a belief in a shared purpose, a common yet precious resource. That belongs to all of us when we share. And so you began seeking a beloved community, a people that does not put fences on love, a community that holds its arms open to the possibilities of love, a heart home to nourish your soul and share your gifts. Welcome to your home. Welcome to worship. Join us now in hymn number 298, Wake Now, My Senses. We will now have a few moments for meditation, reflection, and prayer. The singing bowl will lead us into silence. After the silence, we will sing Spirit of Life, hymn number 123. You're welcome to sing along.
Hello, everyone. I'm Roxanne Spencer, and I'm reading today's Story for All Ages. Adapted from The Bear That Wasn't by Frank Tashlin. The bear in the forest notices leaves falling and feels chilly. It will soon be winter. Time to find a cave and hibernate. And that's just what the bear did. While the bear slept, workers arrived nearby and built a great, huge factory and an industrial complex. As winter turns to spring, the bear awakens and steps out of his cave. His eyes pop. Where is the forest? What happened? The factory foreman takes the bear for a worker and tells him to get to work. The bear says, "But I'm not a man, I'm a bear." "You are not a bear. You are a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat," says the foreman. Well, the bear insists he's a bear, and the foreman insists he's a worker. So the foreman takes the bear up the chain of command to boss after boss, each declaring that the bear is just a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat, all the way up to the elderly president who decides the bear cannot be a bear because all bears live in the zoo. "You are not a bear. You are a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat," says the president. The bear is taken to the zoo, hoping to gain support from the other bears. But even the zoo bears claim he's not a bear, because if he was, he'd be behind bars like us. Eventually, the bear thinks he must be a silly man and works hard at the factory to satisfy the foreman and the other bosses. However, winter comes again, as it always does, and the bear feels cold. He wishes he knew what a silly man would do to get warm. In the end, the bear finds a cave and crawls in, feeling comfortable and bear-like once more. As the bear drifts into sleep, he reflects on the events of the year and he realizes, just because all the bosses and even the zoo bears didn't believe he was a bear did not make it so. The truth is, he was not a silly man, and he was not a silly bear either. The end.
Good morning. Today's reading is by Jill Weiss. When I was a little boy, I prayed to God. I prayed God would make me a girl because I knew I wasn't really a boy, not inside. I didn't want to keep pretending to be a boy because it was hard to pretend all the time. I knew I couldn't go on forever pretending. It made me very tired and sad. I wondered why God would want me to be tired and sad every day. But I tried not to disappoint God. One morning, after praying like this for many years, I woke up and God had changed me. God changed my tiredness to courage. God gave me the courage to tell the truth. God gave me the courage to tell people that I wasn't a boy, even though it made some people laugh and some people mad. God's courage has made me happy. God's courage has taught me to love myself. God's courage lets me have my outside just like my inside. God's courage gives me the gift of honesty. God is truth. I thank God for giving me the courage to tell the truth. I thank God for giving me the courage to be me. Thank you, God, for creating this whole infinitely complex universe and for creating infinitely complex me. Thus ends the reading.
And now join us in singing hymn number 1053, How Could Anyone? As mentioned earlier, Unitarian Universalists have a wide array of beliefs, and the speakers at our Sunday services come from many traditions. The Reverend Dr. Deane Oliva is an affiliate minister here at the Unitarian Universalist Church at Bowling Green. She volunteers in social justice activities, and she deploys with Red Cross disaster teams. And she loves to play bridge. She's a real friend to us here at UUBG, and she's a real friend to me. And I would like to introduce you to Dr. Olivia.
Good morning. We are living in challenging times, and rights which have been so carefully won in recent years are being challenged. And our most vulnerable are the most at risk. Imagine a 13-year-old being kicked out of the house, told never to return because he did not want to be called a girl anymore. Imagine being brutally stabbed 20 times because you are transgender. Imagine an injured person being kicked to death by the police when they found out that she was not really a woman. Imagine being told that you are the spawn of the devil. Imagine. Gender expression is usually considered hardwired. A transgender person clearly and adamantly declares that they are in the wrong body, that God made a mistake. Most children are aware of their gender identity by the time they're 2 to 4. The 18-month-old girl whose first words are, "me, boy," or the 2-year-old boy who would want you to remind Santa that he's really a girl is likely to have a stable gender preference over time. Let us take another moment to imagine. Imagine having a child, a niece, a nephew that you learn is transgender. How does your heart feel? Is your first reaction to cry, to be filled with hurt, anger, fear? Or could your heart possibly be filled with joy that this child has felt comfortable enough with you to share their most innermost secret? The questions swirl. How will you react? What should you do? What would you do? Should you tell others? Should you keep it a secret? Do you reach out for help? In our culture, transgender children will be bullied, will be harassed, and will have to deal with injustices and unfairness simply because they are different. This is not a possibility. This is a certainty. In school, they may encounter the outright rejection or qualified acceptance of both children and adults, and they must decide where to stand on many issues. For example, does the child dress for physical education? With the other youngsters or by self? How will sports teams be handled? Band uniforms? Where does the youngster go to the bathroom? What's the best response to? You mean there's a boy underneath that skirt? But school and restrooms are not the only place where transgender folks suffer. Let me emphatically state that transgender and gender nonconforming people confront injustice every single day, in every turn, in their homes, their workplaces, their communities, and their healthcare places. Perhaps not surprisingly, African American transgender respondents fare far worse than all others in most areas examined. Transgender people tend to be extremely isolated, at risk, and in need of support. Unfortunately, many experience significant family rejection. 1/5 experience homelessness at some time, and the majority who go to shelters are harassed both by staff and residents. 90% of those surveyed report experiencing harassment, mistreatment, or discrimination on the job, or took actions like hiding who they are in order to avoid the harassment, and a staggering 41% of respondents reported attempting suicide. The term transsexual is now most often used for those who are medically altering their body through hormone treatment and possibly surgery. In the past, this medical procedure was called sexual reassignment surgery. Now, joyfully, it is often described as sexual affirming surgery. Not every transgender person wants or goes through hormone therapy or even medical interventions. Part of me questions, why not? Wouldn't it make their life easier and more fulfilling? At a deeper level, I hear that irrational, well, maybe if they don't want to go through surgery, maybe they're not really transsexual or transgender. Maybe they're just confused. I also hear the lingering and very real question, if you don't have that sexual reaffirming surgery, then perhaps you should use the restrooms assigned to your biologically assigned sex. It seems simple, but one of the most prevalent and enduring fears of transgender folk is that no matter what restroom they use, they will be harassed or assaulted, and their fear is grounded in experience. Over 50% have been verbally harassed or disrespected in public places. Despite these dire findings, as a group, the respondents are resilient. Here's one respondent's report. My mother disowned me. I was fired from my job after 18 years as a loyal employee. I was forced onto public assistance to survive. But still, I have pressed forward, started a new career, and rebuilt my immediate family. You are defined not by falling, but by how well you pick yourself up after falling. I'm a licensed practical nurse now, and am studying to become an RN. I have walked the streets, and I've been harassed nearly every day, but I will not change. I am back out there the next day with my head held up. I'd like to emphasize that a supportive environment makes all the difference in the life of both youngsters and adults. Each person must know that they are not the only one who feels as they do, and that they are not just okay, but that they are a gift. That is what we Unitarian Universalists know. You are, I am, we are each worthy individuals who should be treated with respect and dignity and compassion, fairness at all times, centered in love. For those of you who believe in God, our God is a loving God, based firmly in our Universalist tradition. Let our religion always stand on the side of love. But now, I will take off my minister's garb and move to a more personal level. This story is real. It is not me. It is not me. but it is exactly true. Hello. I've got notes. Most of you know me as Patti Lynn. Patti Lynn Johnson. Lynn is a family name. It's my grandfather's, my father's father's name. I was not always Patricia Lynn. I'd like to take you back in time now, tell you a little bit about myself. It's a big step for me, but one I wanted to make in gratitude to my new and dear friends for the life that we share. I hope that you will stand on the side of love and continue to affirm me as they have. I was born in 1936 in a large southern town. I was the firstborn son of John and Mary Johnson. My name was Patrick Lynn Johnson. My parents divorced after the birth of my brother Tim. I was 3 years old, and I was sent to live with my grandparents. There were two twin girls. Well, actually, yeah, two twin girls. I was with their single mom living next door. Often, we would go out to the park without our parents and play. I'd also get to go over to their house, and we would play with dolls and other toys. My grandmother watched our play, and one day she asked me if I'd like to try on her clothes and her makeup. I think I croaked out a yes. We started out that night. After about a week, she bought me some dresses, shoes, socks, and underwear. When she first showed me those treasures, I nearly fainted, but she also told me that it had to be a secret. I was not to tell anyone what we were doing, even my granddad and my friends next door. I was in heaven, and I guarded that secret. Now, it turned out that my grandmother did tell my aunt, her sister, but that was okay. This went on for several years, but then both my grandparents and my mom moved. We all moved into the same neighborhood so that the whole large family could be close together. I lived with my mom and my brother, and we went over to my grandparents' house daily. And then, one day, my world shattered. Oh, yeah. I was about 9 years old, and as usual, I ran over to my grandmother's home and went to change into my dress. The drawer was empty. I asked Grandma, where were my dresses? She told me that I was a boy, and I had to start dressing and acting like a boy. Devastated, I ran over to my aunt's house and asked her if I could continue to dress at her home. She talked to my grandmother, and they agreed that I could continue until the end of the school year, but not as often as before. I cried, I screamed, I thought my life was really over. Finally, they calmed me down, but my grandmother told me that this was just a phase I was going through and I would grow out of it. At this time, I was living with my mother, and when no one was home, I would dress up in her clothes and use her makeup. Sometimes I would be, very sick, too sick to go to school, and I'd use that time to dress. My mom started showing me how to clean the house and change the beds. She was working on different shifts at her job, so sometimes my grandmother would stay with us when she was working. Grandma would take my brother Tim to the park, and then I could dress just for a bit while I was alone in the house. I was about 11 then. One day my friends and I were riding our bikes in the park, perhaps on our way to go swimming or play tennis. Someone said, "You know, I heard that if you kiss your elbow, you'll turn into the opposite sex." I think I almost fell off my bike. My friend asked me what was wrong, and I said, I must have hit a stone or a rock. Can you imagine my excitement? I rushed home, and for the next several days, I almost dislocated my shoulder trying to kiss my elbow. For the next few years, whenever I was alone in the house, I would dress up in my mom's clothes and her makeup, and I did the housework as well. I knew I was different, and I kept asking myself, am I the only one in the world like this? When I was 16, the answer came, and it would change my world. I was in high school. One day, I was reading the newspaper, and there was an article about Christine Jorgensen. For those of you who might not know, Christine Jorgensen was born George William Jorgensen, Jr., and was the first widely known figure to have sexual reassignment surgery. When she returned to the United States from Denmark, where the surgery was done, she became a media sensation, and this is when I read about her. Now, for the first time, I knew I wasn't the only one. There are others like me. That one article changed my life. I could never explain how I felt, and you couldn't possibly understand. This was the late 1950s, and conformity was the rule. No one dared to be different. To do so would be at risk for severe beating at the very least. But I was lucky. I got a job at the high school library during study hall, and the high school librarian recommended me for a job at the University Medical School library. After 6 months, I had saved enough money to buy a car, and that really opened my world. I drove to a discount clothing store and I bought a few skirts, tights, panties, bras. I would wear them when nobody was home. I would wear a dress or skirt and top when I was doing the housework, and I was very careful. If any of my friends or my brother found out, I'd be dead, and I knew it. I was also playing varsity tennis. The jocks would tease the team members, including me, because we were playing a girls' sport. I carefully hid my secret. I kept my feminine clothes in a box in the far corner of the basement where I was sure no one would go. And then I left for college. I went to a good school, and I joined a fraternity. I did this to try and fit in and appear completely normal. I knew that if I didn't fit in, I'd be ostracized. College was only about 100 miles from my home, and I'd go home about every 6 weeks. By then, I knew that it was a big risk for anyone to know that I was transgendered. One weekend, I went home and I ran downstairs to the basement to get my clothes. I opened the box, and immediately I knew something was wrong, something was different. All of my clothes had been washed and ironed. I was, to put it mildly, shocked and terrified. I didn't say a word to anybody, not for the whole weekend. And nobody said anything to me, not then and not later. After graduation, I joined the Navy, and I put Patti Lynn, as I had always called myself, into a deep, dark vault. Sometimes when I had shore leave, I would go to a drag show. It didn't really help me much, except to reinforce the fact that I was not alone. I applied and was accepted into a medical nuclear program and met and married my wife, Sandy. After 10 months after my discharge from the Navy, my son, Jerome, was born. I was working in my field of nuclear medicine and health physics. Sandy and I led a typical, normal life. When I wanted to finish my master's degree in nuclear physics, the reality of parenthood sunk in. Further schooling had to be delayed. When my son Jerome was 5 or 6 years old, Patti Lynn wanted to come out. The only time I felt safe letting her out was when I was on a business trip, and they were few and far between. I was terrified of being fired. Remember, we're still in the 60s now. One day, what would it be like today? I don't really know how different. One day in mid-career, I went back to my hometown to visit my mother. We were talking about high school and college, and out of the blue, she mentioned finding the clothes in the basement. She also told me that she had washed and ironed them, and she was waiting for me to say something. We talked, we cried. She told me that she had an appointment. She had an appointment with her gynecologist the next day, and would I like her to make an appointment for me with the gynecologist? I said I would. The next day we both went. The gynecologist told me that she would prescribe estrogen and progesterone treatment if and only if I agreed to return every 6 months for physicals and blood work. I was only too glad to agree. This went on for many years with only my mom and I knowing about it. I continued to work in my field, raised my son, and continued my life with my wife, Sandy. But I made a promise. I promised myself that when I retired, Patti Lynn would come out. So in 1995, 3 years before my retirement, I started to buy clothes from catalogs. I would wear ankle boots and leggings to work. I bought a shoulder purse, backpack, and I started carrying it to work. I did everything with trepidation. I was terrified that someone would make a comment, and I wasn't sure how I'd respond. But no one ever did. I began to wear women's jeans, and on weekends, in fact, after a while, I even wore the jeans and carried a purse backpack to church, and no one said anything. Can you imagine? Can you even begin to imagine retirement? I had my first manicure and my first hair coloring. I began to wear what has now become my trademark, a string of pearls. I was volunteering at my Baptist church. I was an usher, I was a librarian, I was a deacon. I was always wearing women's jeans. My life was looking up. Patti Lynn was becoming a reality. I was becoming me for about 6 months. Then the pastor of the church left and was replaced by a new preacher. About a month after he started, he asked me to come to the office of the church. I agreed, and when I arrived, he and one of the deacons were waiting for me. He started right in. I hear that you've been buying female clothes and having your hair and nails done. This is completely unbiblical, and it has to stop. Now, we can arrange Christian counseling for you. You will be cured. It was an ultimatum. Either do that or you have to leave the church. I said, fine, and I hope you have someone to volunteer in the library, as I marched out. I was numb for about 2 weeks, though, and then I remembered that my best friend had often invited me to visit the Unitarian Universalist church. I got up that Sunday, took a shower, did my hair, put on my capris and a top, grabbed my purse, crossed my fingers, and drove to the church. I recognized many friends. I didn't know they were UUs. I had high hopes that this would work. I saw and met a lot of people, and no one said anything unkind. As the weeks went by, I formed many friendships, and I would ask my new friends about different types of clothes. All said the same thing. If you are comfortable, wear it. So I began to wear more feminine clothes, but I still couldn't find the nerve to wear a dress or a skirt. I haven't had the sex reassignment surgery. I'm older, and it's way too expensive. Even the medications that I have to take are very expensive. It took me months to get up the nerve to order from another country, where it is much, much cheaper, but it has helped. This past year, I took speech therapy to help me with my voice changes. One day, my friend asked me why I wanted to be a little old woman, and I thought for a minute, and then I answered, it's better than being a little old man. Time went by, and one day I was asked if I would do a service and talk about myself. At first, I thought, no way. But then I thought about it. The church had been so understanding, and I was sure that there were lots of questions. So I said that I would do it. I started to prepare. Part of the preparation was to tell my family something I had not yet had the nerve to do. Sandy is a good woman, and we as a couple have come to many understandings and a closer relationship. We've even begun sharing some things. It's been harder for my son Jerome to accept. He's in the throes of being a parent, and I'm sure the loss of his father, me, has been difficult for him. We will just have to see how that turns out. Finally, I was ready to do the service. I worked on it night and day, writing, rewriting, finding music, making friends, asking friends to sing and to speak, and I wanted to wear a dress so badly. I must have asked at least a dozen people what they thought about me wearing a dress, and everyone said, "Don't do it. You'll be so nervous, and a dress is going to be an additional distraction." All the advice was given in such a loving and a friendly way. This was several years ago. I was so nervous. I cried, and a few times I didn't think I could finish, but it was with friends. On that day, we cut up my old credit cards, my old driver's license, and took out my new one and my new checkbook. We had a birthday cake and a celebration because Patti Lynn was born. Since then, I've lived a full life. I've given several talks and found a support group, which has been a godsend. And yes, now I wear skirts and dresses. People ask me why I went through all of this. I can only respond, do you live a life of falsehood? Could you handle living a lie? I had to live the truth. This is who I am. Until recently, it's been very rare to meet an identified transgendered person. This is changing. Unfortunately, I now know many lurid stories about the horrible things that can happen to transgendered folks, the fear that many of us have about them. The most prevalent fear, one of the first things I learned about Patti Lynn when we first met her, she would only go out for short periods of time with us. Finally, she told us that she couldn't go to a restroom in a public place. If she went into the women's room, she was afraid somebody would scream and yell that there was a man in there in town. And if she went to the men's room, she was afraid she'd get beat up. In town, she would seek out places that have single stall restrooms. That's changing. It's changing for the better. I feel her problem, and yet I know Patti Lynn. And I ask myself, how would I feel if a stranger, kind of male-looking, walked into the women's room in a restaurant? I struggle with that. If everyone is required to use the bathroom of their birth-defined gender, my colleague, Reverend Sean Dennison, with his Perry Mason build and his small beard, would be forced to use the women's restroom. Yeah, I worry about that. Not good. As Unitarian Universalists, I hope that we will be a safe haven for gender non-conforming folk, that we will affirm the wounded and lift up their strengths and their resilience. And I can honestly say that I think this congregation does that. We try hard, we work at it, and we can continue to do this. We can educate ourselves so that our questions dissolve and we can open our hearts more fully. We can call transgendered folk by their preferred name, making an effort to use the pronouns with which they are comfortable. And folks, we're going to screw up on those pronouns. And that's okay. It's the intent, it's the trial. Try it. We can refrain from making assumptions. We can refrain from asking intrusive questions, but with friendship, we will deepen our bonds through honest, sincere dialogue. I hope that we explore our own feelings about this issue and that we always look through a lens of love and respect, for this is who we are, a gentle, loving people.
Please join us now in hymn number 170, We Are a Gentle, Angry People.
We
often like to share our joys and concerns as part of our service. Please write, if you'd like now, into the chat box, writing your joys, your concerns, things that make you feel gratitude or sorrow. You can also share these later during the coffee hour or in breakout rooms. If you like, you could also send those later to the church at our email site. Also, as part of our service, we see that being able to share not only our concerns and joys, but also helping us to financially help with the church. You can make a donation at the site on the website here, or you can send a check to the office at UUCBG. That's at 2033 Nashville Road, Bowling Green, Kentucky, 42101. As our gathering ends, we will extinguish the flame in the chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts wherever we go.
Rahm Emanuel reminds us to never let a serious crisis go to waste. It is an opportunity to open our hearts in compassion as we fight for justice, each through our own challenges, each through our own strengths, each in our own way. May we leave this service and yet go in service to our commitment to justice, to our community, to our faith. May it be so.
Go in peace. Go in service to others. Go in love.